picture this scenario because um, I'm willing to bet you have lived it recently. It's like 4:00 p.m. on a Thursday. You were sitting at your desk, just staring at a blinking cursor on a document you were supposed to finish, 3 days ago.
Oh, yeah. We have all been there.
Right. And your web browser has roughly 50 tabs open, shrinking until you can't even read the titles anymore. Your messaging app is just a sea of red notification dots.
It's completely overwhelming.
It is. You feel physically and mentally exhausted, like you've been running a marathon since 8:00 a.m. But when you actually look back at the day, when you try to pinpoint what you actually accomplished, your mind just goes blank.
Yes, you've achieved almost nothing of substance, yet you are completely drained.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are diagnosing today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are on a very specific mission today. We are going to build an escape route for you.
Which is so necessary right now. It really is the defining paradox of the modern knowledge worker. We have never been more exhausted, and we have never had less to show for it.
Yeah, you feel the acute pain of burnout, but you cannot point to the specific injury that caused it.
It is a diagnostic nightmare, honestly, because the uncomfortable truth is that most of us are operating on default settings. Settings that were designed by accident, or worse, designed by the tech companies competing for our attention.
Right. We spend our entire day reacting to external stimuli instead of, directing our own cognitive resources.
Exactly. We are entirely reactive.
So to fix this, we have brought in a massive stack of research today. We are pulling from cognitive psychology, chronobiology, and the daily protocols of some of the highest performing people on the planet.
It is a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But we are going to synthesize all of this into one cohesive, science-backed operating system for your workday. And I want to make a promise right up front. We are not just going to hand you a list of generic life hacks.
Right. We aren't here to tell you to just drink a glass of water and turn off your phone notifications. That doesn't work.
No, we need to go much deeper than that. We need to look at the actual neurological and physiological mechanisms that govern how you think, how you focus, and how you transition between states of mind.
Because if you don't understand the why behind a habit, it will never stick.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I am just so eager to dismantle the pervasive myth that working harder, putting in more hours, and grinding yourself to dust is the same thing as working smarter.
It is an incredibly toxic myth. And to dismantle it properly, we actually have to step back. We have to start before the actual work even begins.
Wait, before the work begins.
Yeah. The foundation of a productive workday isn't established at your desk. It is established in the very first minutes after you open your eyes.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Before you can conquer a massive project, you have to get your own brain online correctly.
Exactly. We are looking at the research of Tim Ferriss here. He has spent decades deconstructing the habits of world-class performers, athletes, and executives.
Right. He developed this protocol for, winning the day. His thesis is that if you can secure at least 3 of his 5 specific morning rituals within the first 60 to 90 minutes of waking up, you have effectively won the morning.
And winning the morning sets the trajectory for winning the day. What is crucial to understand about his approach is the underlying intention. He isn't suggesting this specific sequence because it holds some mystical power.
It's not magic.
No, not at all. He is suggesting it because it establishes a baseline of biological and psychological control before the chaos of the world intrudes.
Let's run through his 5 rituals because they are incredibly specific. Number 1 is almost laughably simple, making the bed.
It really does sound too simple.
It takes maybe 45 seconds. It feels like a chore a parent assigns a child. Why is a high-performance researcher insisting on this?
Well, it comes down to a psychological concept called the locus of control. In psychology, your locus of control is the degree to which you believe you have agency over the outcomes in your life.
Okay, so feeling like you're in the driver's seat.
Exactly. When you wake up, your phone is going to present you with 100 things you cannot control. Urgent emails, breaking news, a crisis at work. Making your bed is an immediate physical manifestation of order in your environment.
You're taking an environment of chaos, like tangled sheets, and imposing order on it.
Right. That triggers a very small but very real release of dopamine. It signals to your brain that you are an agent of action, not merely a passive recipient of the day's events.
So it's the first domino falling. It sets the momentum. Ritual number 2 is meditation. Ferris aims for 10 to 20 minutes.
He does. He mentions practices like transcendental meditation or vipassana or even just using guided audio.
But he is very clear that the goal isn't to reach some state of spiritual enlightenment before you commute to work.
Absolutely not. In the context of productivity, meditation is purely mechanical. It is weightlifting for your attention span.
Weightlifting for your attention span. I love that.
Let's look at the neuroscience. When you sit down to focus on your breath, your mind will inevitably wander. That wandering state is governed by something called the default mode network in your brain.
Okay.
The moment you notice your mind has wandered and you actively choose to bring your attention back to your breath, you are engaging your executive function. You are essentially doing a rep.
Wait, so every time you get distracted and catch yourself, that's a successful repetition, not a failure.
Precisely. Vipassana, for instance, involves intensely scanning the body and noticing physical sensations without reacting to them.
It's just observing.
Yes, you are training the neural pathways that allow you to observe an impulse, like the impulse to check social media while writing a difficult report, and let that impulse pass without acting on it. You are literally thickening the prefrontal cortex over time.
That reframes meditation entirely. It's not about emptying the mind, it's about leash training it. Which brings us to ritual number 3, and this one always surprises people: hanging or spinal decompression.
It does sound eccentric.
He uses a pull-up rig or gravity boots to just physically hang upside down or suspend his body weight.
It sounds wild, but the physiology is sound. Throughout the day, gravity compresses our intervertebral discs. When we sleep horizontally, they decompress to some extent and rehydrate with synovial fluid.
But active hanging elongates the spine even further.
More importantly, it acts as a profound reset for the autonomic nervous system.
How does stretching your back affect your nervous system?
Our physiology and our psychology are locked in a continuous feedback loop. When you are stressed, your body physically contracts. Your shoulders hunch, your jaw tightens.
Right, you get all tense.
Exactly. Your brain senses this physical contraction and interprets it as a threat, which releases more stress hormones like cortisol. By physically elongating the spine and opening the chest through hanging, you are mechanically forcing the body into an expansive posture.
Oh, wow. So you're reversing the signal.
You are. This sends a signal through the vagus nerve to the brain, essentially saying the physical structure is expansive and safe, therefore the environment must be safe. It shifts you out of the sympathetic fight or flight state and into the parasympathetic rest and digest state.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
You are hacking your brain by stretching your spine. Okay, ritual 4 is all about intake. Titanium tea.
Yes, his specific brew.
Ferris consumes a highly specific blend. It's aged pupur, black tea, green tea, turmeric, and ginger.
Yeah.
Why this specific witch's brew instead of just a massive cup of dark roast coffee?
It has everything to do with how caffeine interacts with the brain's adenosine receptors. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter that builds up in your brain the longer you are awake. Think of it like sleep pressure.
Okay, it locks into specific receptors and makes you feel tired.
Right. Caffeine works by mimicking adenosine. It fits into those same receptors and blocks the adenosine from attaching.
So the tiredness is still there, you just can't feel it.
Exactly. Now, if you flood your system with 4 shots of espresso, you block all the receptors at once. You get a massive spike in perceived energy.
But then comes the crash, right?
Yes, because your brain compensates by quickly producing more receptors. When the caffeine eventually metabolizes and releases its grip, all that built-up adenosine floods the new receptors at once. That is the 2:00 p.m. crash where you feel like you need a nap under your desk.
And the tea prevents that crash.
Yes. Pure RT is fermented, which alters its chemical profile and interacts beneficially with the gut microbiome, but the key is the combination of black and green tea.
What does the green tea do?
Green tea contains an amino acid called L-theanine. L-theanine crosses the blood-brain barrier and has a calming, regulating effect on the nervous system. When combined with caffeine, L-theanine smooths out the absorption curve.
Oh, so it's not a sudden spike.
Right. It provides a steady, metered release of alertness without the jittery spike, and consequently, without the catastrophic crash. The turmeric and ginger are potent anti-inflammatories, reducing systemic inflammation, which is a known cause of brain fog.
So it's an energy marathon, not a sprint. Finally, we have Ritual 5, which is journaling. He uses tools like the 5-minute journal or Julia Cameron's concept of morning pages. He isn't drafting a memoir, though. He describes it as a garbage-out session.
From a cognitive perspective, this is an exercise in clearing your working memory. Working memory is your brain's short-term scratch pad.
And it has a severely limited capacity, right?
It does. It can only hold a few items at a time. If you wake up and you are holding on to anxiety about a client meeting at noon, frustration about an argument from the night before, and a mental grocery list, your working memory is full.
You literally don't have the RAM available to process new information.
Exactly. You are operating with diminished cognitive bandwidth. Journaling is a process of cognitive offloading.
Getting it out of your head and onto paper.
Yes. By writing those anxieties, random ideas, and tasks down on physical paper, you convince your brain that the information is stored safely externally. It no longer needs to keep those items active in working memory. You are freeing up processing power for the deep work ahead.
Okay, so that is the ultimate morning protocol. You make the bed for dopamine, meditate to train the prefrontal cortex, hang to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, drink the tea for sustained L-theanine energy, and journal to clear your working memory.
The mind is pristine.
So what is the very first actual piece of work you do?
You eat the frog.
This is Brian Tracy's legendary philosophy, pulled from a supposed Mark Twain quote, right? If the first thing you do each morning is eat a live frog, you can go through the rest of the day knowing that the worst is behind you.
That's the one.
In Tracy's system, the frog is the biggest, ugliest, most cognitively demanding, and most important task on your to-do list.
The logic here is deeply tied to a concept called ego depletion. While the science on ego depletion is nuanced, the general consensus is that our capacity for intense focus and willpower is not infinite.
It drains as the day goes on?
Exactly. It depletes as the day goes on and we make decisions. Right after a proper morning protocol, your cognitive resources are at their absolute apex.
So you shouldn't waste that prime time.
Right. If you waste that apex state answering trivial emails or organizing your desktop folders, you are spending your premium mental currency on cheap goods.
Wait, I love that concept. Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. It feels like turning on a high-end laptop and immediately commanding it to launch 50 massive, complicated video editing files before the operating system is even fully loaded.
That is a perfect analogy.
The fan starts screaming, everything freezes, and you haven't even started editing yet.
You are artificially creating a bottleneck in your own processing power.
And that is exactly what we do when we wake up. Skip any sort of intentional routine, grab our phones while still in bed, and immediately start scrolling through 50 emails and social media alerts. We are crashing our own system before our feet even hit the floor.
You are allowing the external world to dictate the terms of your attention right out of the gate.
But hold on, I need to interrupt here because we have to ground this in reality.
Yeah.
I am looking at this 90-minute ferris protocol. 90 minutes of meditating, hanging upside down like Batman, brewing loosely fermented tea, and writing in a journal.
It's a lot for most people.
If you are a 25-year-old tech entrepreneur with zero dependence, sure. But what about a parent with 2 toddlers who are screaming for breakfast at 6:00 a.m.? What about someone working 2 jobs? This sounds like an incredible luxury for the elite, not a practical tool for the average busy person.
You are absolutely right to challenge that. It is the single biggest friction point people have when they encounter these high-performance protocols.
They just give up.
They do. They see the 90-minute timeline, realize they only have 15 minutes, and they abandon the whole concept. But that is a mistake because they are confusing the form of the ritual with the function of the ritual.
Expand on that. Form versus function.
The specific tools Ferris uses, the gravity boots, the pu'er tea, are just his chosen form. The function is what matters. To understand the function, we have to look at the work of high-performance researcher Brendan Burchard, and specifically his concept of generating energy.
Generating energy as opposed to just waking up and hoping you have it.
Precisely. Energy isn't just something you passively possess based on how many hours you slept. It is a state you actively generate through intention and physical action. Furthermore, we have to look at Harvard professor Teresa Amabile's landmark research on the power of small wins.
What does she find?
Her research involved analyzing thousands of daily diary entries from knowledge workers to see what correlated with high motivation and positive emotions. She found that the single most powerful catalyst for a positive inner work life, which is the internal emotional landscape that drives productivity, was making progress in meaningful work.
So just feeling like you're moving forward.
Even incredibly small, incremental progress. When you achieve a small, controlled win, it cascades through your psychology.
So how does the busy parent apply this?
By distilling the function into whatever time they have. If you only have 10 minutes before the chaos of the household begins, you do not try to squeeze in 90 minutes of activities. You execute a micro-protocol.
Give me an example of a micro protocol.
You make the bed. There is your small win, your locus of control. You drink a large glass of water instead of specialty tea. There is your physiological reset.
Okay, that's doable.
You take 3 deep, intentional breaths. There is your moment of executive function training. And you write down your single biggest frog for the day on a sticky note. There is your cognitive offloading.
So you get all the benefits in a fraction of the time.
You have achieved the exact same psychological baseline as Ferris, just compressed. You have signaled to your brain, I have a person who is in control, and I generate my own momentum.
Okay, that changes everything. It's about the architecture of the morning, not the expensive furniture you put inside it. So I do my micro routine. I am energized. I have my sticky note with my ugly frog on it. But let's say it's 8 a.m. I sit down at my desk, ready to tackle this massive analytical report, and my brain feels like it's full of cotton. Doesn't my fundamental biology override the momentum of my morning routine?
It absolutely does. And this is a massive blind spot in traditional productivity advice. We are constantly told that the hallmark of a successful person is waking up at 5 a.m. and grinding before the sun comes up.
Right, the whole 5 a.m. club thing?
But the hard science of biological timing tells a completely different story.
I was hoping we would get here. This is Elizabeth Ricker's fascinating research on chronobiology.
Chronobiology is the study of how our biological rhythms interact with time. Ricker's research completely dismantles the one-size-fits-all 5 a.m. club mentality.
So we aren't all built the same.
Science has definitively proven that human beings do not all operate on the same internal circadian clock. We fall into different biological profiles known as chronotypes.
Let's break these down, because realizing which one you are is a total paradigm shift. First, we have the larks, or the morning types. These are the people who naturally wake up early, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed without an alarm.
Yes, and structurally, their biology reflects this. Their cortisol awakening response, the natural spike in the stress hormone cortisol that helps us wake up and become alert, happens very early and very sharply.
Okay, so they peak early.
For a lark, their peak analytical performance, their absolute sharpest executive function, hits early in the morning. As the afternoon wears on, their cognitive abilities experience a slow, steady decline.
Then you have the total opposite, the owls, or evening types. Their internal clock is shifted significantly later.
And this isn't a modern invention caused by artificial light. Evolutionary biologists believe owls existed to act as night sentinels for early human tribes, staying awake to guard the camp while the larks slept.
That is so cool. So they were literally built for the night shift.
For an owl, their cognitive abilities are incredibly sluggish in the morning. They actually ramp up slowly throughout the day, hitting their absolute peak performance in the late afternoon or even deep into the evening.
And finally, you have the intermediates. From what I understand, this is actually where a large portion, perhaps the majority of the population, falls.
Correct. Intermediates don't have the extreme early spike of the lark or the late surge of the owl. Their cognitive peak usually hits right in the middle of the day, roughly 4 to 6 hours after they wake up.
So if an intermediate wakes up at 7 a.m., they are hitting their absolute stride between 11:00 a.m. and 1:00 p.m.
Exactly. The critical thing to remember is that these are not lifestyle preferences. It's not about an owl being lazy because they can't focus at an 8:00 a.m. meeting.
No, it is hardwired into their physiology. These chronotypes are reflected in measurable biological markers, right? Differences in hormone secretion timing, core body temperature fluctuations, and even specific gene expressions like the PER3 gene. You cannot simply willpower your way out of your genetics.
And the penalty for trying to fight your genetics is severe. Ricker's data on this is shocking.
It is. Her research highlights that working out of alignment with your natural chronotype, for example, forcing a night owl to execute deep, complex data analysis at 8:00 a.m. can result in a plunge in cognitive performance by up to 30%.
That is a staggering drop in ability.
30%. That is massive. Think about what that means in reality. If you fight your biology, you are walking into your office and voluntarily surrendering a third of your intelligence, your focus, and your problem-solving ability every single day. That is the hidden tax of a misaligned schedule.
And it explains why so many people feel like imposters in their jobs. They think they aren't smart enough, when in reality, they were just trying to do the right work at the wrong time.
But wait, this brings up something in Ricker's research that completely blew my mind. It's this concept of the creativity paradox.
Ah, yes. What's fascinating here is that this is one of the most counterintuitive findings in cognitive science. We naturally assume that you should do all of your important work, regardless of what it is, during your biological peak hours.
Right, that seems logical.
But Ricker found that this is definitively false. You have to separate analytical work from creative work.
Okay, lay this out for us. What is the difference, biologically speaking?
Analytical tasks are things like complex data analysis, coding, editing a legal contract, or strategic financial planning. These tasks require incredible precision, logic, and the ability to ruthlessly filter out distractions.
So you need to be sharp.
They require your prefrontal cortex, your executive function, to be operating at absolute maximum capacity. Therefore, analytical tasks must be scheduled during your peak chronotype window.
But creative tasks are different.
Entirely different. Creative tasks like brainstorming a new marketing campaign, designing a logo, or coming up with a novel solution to a structural problem actually benefit from being scheduled during your off-peak hours.
That sounds crazy. Why would I want to do my most innovative thinking when my brain is tired?
Because of how executive function acts as a filter. When your brain is at its peak, it is a highly efficient machine. It keeps you on a narrow, logical path and immediately discards any random, unrelated thoughts.
Okay, so it filters too well.
But creativity is defined by divergent thinking. It is the process of making novel, unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. When you are slightly mentally fatigued during your off-peak hours, the inhibitory grip of your prefrontal cortex weakens. Your brain's filters become porous.
So you actually want to be a little bit distracted.
Exactly. You become more susceptible to tangential thoughts. And in the realm of creativity, those tangents and distractions are often the exact novel ideas and lateral connections that spark a breakthrough.
Oh, I see.
The weakened filter lets the weird, innovative ideas slip through the cracks that your highly logical peak brain would have instantly rejected as irrelevant.
So let me translate this to real life. If I am a lark, my biological peak is 8:00 a.m. I should be eating my analytical frog, my heavy spreadsheets, my budget planning right then. But if my boss asks me to brainstorm a completely out-of-the-box concept for a new product, I shouldn't try to force that at 8 a.m.
Right. You might actually produce far better ideas if you wait until 4:00 p.m. when you're feeling a bit groggy and your logical filters are down.
Precisely. You align the cognitive demand of the task with the biological state of the brain. Think about it. Are you forcing yourself to write a highly analytical, data-heavy report at 4:30 p.m. when your brain is actually primed for unstructured brainstorming? Or are you trying to force wild, creative ideation at 8 a.m. when your brain just wants to organize a spreadsheet and color-code a calendar?
Is fighting your fundamental biology the real reason you go home feeling so burned out? We so often blame our lack of discipline or our lack of skill when we should be looking at our lack of biological alignment.
So how do we actually fix this? We need an actionable takeaway here. The solution is to audit your own energy. For 1 week, just 5 workdays, keep a simple log on your desk. Every 2 hours, write down a number from 1 to 10, rating your mental alertness and focus.
It doesn't need to be complex. At 9:00 a.m., are you a sluggish 4 or a sharp 8? At 2:00 p.m., where are you?
By the end of Friday, a highly specific pattern will emerge. You will clearly see your peak window. And once you find it, your mission is to map Brian Tracy's frog, that biggest, ugliest, most analytical task, directly onto that specific time frame.
If you realize you are an intermediate and your peak doesn't hit until 11:30 a.m., then that is exactly when you eat the frog. It is perfectly fine to spend your 9:00 a.m. doing lighter work while your brain boots up.
You are customizing your operating system to match your unique hardware. Okay, the pieces are coming together. We have established how to start the day to generate energy. We know exactly when your brain is biologically primed to do heavy lifting. Now, we have to look at the work itself.
We must define exactly what you should be focusing on during those peak hours. Because all work is not created equal, even though our to-do lists treat every bullet point the same.
Right. We are pulling heavily from Cal Newport's philosophy here, specifically his framework that has been mapped out by the data team at Reclaim.ai. We need to define the 2 radically different modes of work: deep work and shallow work.
Understanding this distinction is the watershed moment for anyone trying to reclaim their productivity.
Let's break them down. Deep work. These are distraction-free, highly demanding tasks that push your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit. This is the work that compounds your expertise and creates immense, irreplaceable value for you and your organization.
We're talking about writing complex code algorithms, drafting a nuanced strategic business plan, analyzing raw market data to find hidden trends, or writing a book.
The defining characteristic of deep work is that it is hard to replicate. You cannot simply hand a standard operating procedure manual to a brand new college graduate and expect them to execute deep work on day one.
Right. It requires your unique synthesis of skills, experience, and intense concentration. And biologically, deep work requires a process called myelination.
Myelination, what is that?
When you focus intensely on a specific skill, your brain begins to wrap the relevant neural circuits in a fatty white tissue called myelin. Myelin acts like insulation on an electrical wire. It allows the neural signals to fire faster and much more efficiently.
So it's literally upgrading your brain's hardware.
This is the physical mechanism of skill acquisition and expertise, but myelination only happens under conditions of intense, unbroken focus. To reach the necessary flow state for this to occur, Newport argues you typically need unbroken blocks of time, often 90 minutes or more.
Unbroken is the key word there, because then we have the opposite end of the spectrum, shallow work. This is the logistical, easily replicable, non-cognitively demanding work that fills our days.
This is checking and responding to Slack messages, updating a status field in a Jira ticket, forwarding a routine email, filling out an expense report, or scheduling a meeting. You can essentially do this work while partially distracted.
Newport offers a brilliant litmus test to identify shallow work. Ask yourself, could a smart recent college graduate be trained to do this specific task within a month? If the answer is yes, it is shallow work.
Now, to be clear, shallow work is not evil. It keeps the lights on, it maintains basic corporate operations, and it prevents bottlenecks. But it rarely, if ever, moves the needle on your primary career outcomes or creates profound new value.
But the reality of how we spend our time is terrifying. The data from Reclaim.ai paints a very grim picture of the modern workday. We are living in a state of profound, deep work deficit.
According to their metrics, knowledge workers are currently suffering a 31.3% deep work deficit. That means people are getting nearly a third less focused, uninterrupted time than they actually need just to fulfill their core job responsibilities.
And the root cause of this deficit is the complete collapse of our attention spans. Reclaim.ai cites research from Dr. Gloria Mark, who studies human-computer interaction. Her data shows that the median attention span on a single screen before a worker switches to a different window or app has collapsed to just 47 seconds.
It is shocking. 47 seconds. Half the time, it's even less than that. You can't even read a complex email thoughtfully in 47 seconds, let alone write a strategic plan or write code. We are living in a state of continuous partial attention.
What is driving this?
It is driven by the dopamine loops designed into our software. Our communication tools, email, Slack, Teams operate on a variable ratio reward schedule, exactly like a slot machine. We check them constantly because we never know when a highly rewarding or highly urgent message will appear.
And that fractures our focus.
This constant checking completely fractures our ability to maintain the flow state necessary for myelination and deep work. Furthermore, consulting firm Robert Half International notes that a staggering 50% of all working time is entirely wasted. Half of the workday is squandered on low-value tasks, unnecessary meetings, context switching, and recovering from interruptions.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Here's where it gets really interesting. If shallow work doesn't produce lasting value, but I spend all day doing it and feel exhausted, is it basically just junk food for the brain?
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
Think about it. When you sit there firing off rapid-fire Slack replies, clearing out your inbox to zero, and color-coding your calendar, it feels like you are eating. It feels like you are working incredibly hard. You are sweating, your fingers are flying across the keyboard. You are hyper-responsive.
But at the end of the day, there is zero nutritional output. You haven't built anything of substance. You haven't created value.
You have just gorged yourself on the dopamine hits of crossing off tiny, irrelevant tasks. You are completely full of cognitive sugar.
And just like a physical diet, you cannot survive long-term on junk food. Your career will stall, your expertise will atrophy. But you also cannot completely eliminate shallow work. You have to answer your boss's emails eventually. The goal isn't elimination. The goal is ruthless filtering and batching.
Which brings us back to Brian Tracy and his frameworks for filtering the junk. He has this incredible tool called the K-Wink analysis. K-W-I-N-K. It stands for knowing what I now know. It is a form of zero-based thinking.
It forces you to reevaluate sunk costs.
Exactly. You look at every single commitment, recurring meeting, and project on your calendar and ask one ruthless question. Knowing what I now know about this, would I start doing this again today?
For example, let's say you joined a cross-departmental committee 2 years ago. It eats up 2 hours every single Tuesday. Knowing what you know now about how little that committee actually accomplishes, would you volunteer for it today?
If the answer is no, you have to find a way to kill it, quit it, or delegate it.
It is a phenomenal way to prune the dead branches of your schedule. And for the tasks that survive the K-Wing test, Tracy uses the ABCDE formula to prioritize them.
Right. A tasks are your massive frogs. These are the deep work tasks that have massive positive consequences if you do them and massive negative consequences if you fail to do them. B tasks are should-dos. They have mild consequences. Someone might be slightly annoyed if you delay them.
C tasks are nice to-dos. Having coffee with a coworker, checking a non-essential industry blog, there are zero professional consequences whether you do them or not.
And then we get to the D tasks, which is the most vital category for high performers looking to escape the junk food diet. D stands for delegate. The rule of thumb here is crucial. If a task is shallow work and it can be done by someone else even 80% as well as you can do it, you must delegate it.
Whether that is an assistant, a junior team member, or automating it with software. Delegating the 80% tasks is a non-negotiable requirement if you want to carve out the 90-minute blocks required for deep work. And finally, E stands for eliminate, which loops right back into the K-Wing analysis.
So you have audited your energy, you know your peak hour. You have used the ABCDE method to filter away the junk food and identify your single most important out, a task frog. How do you actually sit down and execute it? Tracy offers two distinct psychological approaches depending on how you are feeling in that moment. First is the inside-outside method.
This is for when you have high energy and high clarity. You go straight for the absolute center of the task, the 20% core that yields 80% of the overall value.
It's like eating the jelly out of the center of the donut first.
Huh.
If you are writing a book, the inside-outside method means you sit down and immediately write the detailed outline of the chapters before you write a single polished sentence. You tackle the structural core.
But we aren't always operating with high clarity. Sometimes we sit down, look at the massive frog, and feel utterly paralyzed by the sheer size of the project. That is when you deploy the outside-inside method.
How does that work?
You start on the extreme periphery of the task. You do the small, almost trivial parts first. You organize the research PDFs into a folder. You format the margins of the Word document. You create the title page.
Isn't that just productive procrastination?
It can be if you never move past it. But used intentionally, it is a momentum builder. By tackling the easiest peripheral tasks, you drastically lower the barrier to entry. And as you complete those tiny tasks, you are generating those small wins we discussed earlier.
So the dopamine gets you going.
Exactly. The dopamine from formatting the document gives you the slight psychological pull you need to start reading the research, which pulls you into drafting the first paragraph.
Yeah.
You use the shallow periphery to pull yourself into the deep core.
I really appreciate that. You don't have to be a robot. You can adapt your approach based on your psychological state in that specific moment.
Okay, so we are moving along powerfully. You have your morning routine, you know your chronotype, you have identified your deep work, and you have started. And this is a massive, but nobody works in a vacuum.
No, they don't. You inevitably have to switch gears. You get pulled into a mandatory Zoom meeting, and then you have to transition back to your deep work project. This brings us to a critical juncture, because this transition point is where most highly intentional days completely fall apart and devolve into chaos.
The seams between our tasks. It is the most neglected, friction-heavy part of the entire productivity landscape.
To understand why these transitions are so destructive, we have to explore Dr. Sophie Leroy's concept of attention residue.
Leroy's research is groundbreaking. She discovered that our brains do not simply switch tracks cleanly, like a train moving from one rail to another. When you switch from task A to task B, your attention doesn't entirely follow you.
Some of it gets left behind.
A significant portion of your cognitive processing power remains stuck, lingering on task A. That lingering fragment of thought is what she calls attention residue.
And it is especially bad if you were interrupted and task A was left unfinished, right? This ties directly into a very old psychological principle.
Yes, the Zeigarnik effect. This was discovered in the 1920s by a Soviet psychologist.
Tell the story of how she discovered it, because it perfectly illustrates the concept.
She was sitting in a busy cafe in Vienna, observing the waiters. She noticed something extraordinary. The waiters could remember complex, massive orders for large tables without writing anything down. They could remember who had the soup, who had the steak, who wanted extra sauce. Their memory was flawless.
But then what happened?
But the very second the bill was paid and the transaction was complete, the waiters would completely forget the order. If you asked them 5 minutes later what the table had eaten, their minds were blank.
It was like the data was entirely wiped from the hard drive.
Exactly. Zeigarnik realized that the human brain has a powerful involuntary tendency to ruminate on unfinished tasks. An open loop creates a persistent cognitive tension that keeps the information highly accessible. But once a task is closed, the brain releases that tension and dumps the data to save energy.
So, translate the waiter story to the modern office.
If you are in the middle of writing a highly complex piece of code or drafting a sensitive email to a client, and you are suddenly interrupted by a calendar alert forcing you to jump into a 30-minute status meeting, that code or that email is an open loop.
And your brain keeps working on it.
While you are sitting in the meeting trying to listen to your boss, a massive chunk of your brain is silently, obsessively ruminating on the unfinished code in the background. It is consuming massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth.
Which brings us to a major point of friction in the source material. The Reclaim.ai data, citing various interruption studies, states that when you are pulled away from a task, it takes up to 23 minutes to fully regain your prior level of deep focus. They call this the refocus tax.
And they claim it costs knowledge workers between 20 to 40% of their overall daily productivity.
Now, I have to stop here. I am highly skeptical of that 23-minute number. I hear it all the time, and it feels exaggerated. If my colleague sends me a quick Slack message asking where a file is, I answer it in 15 seconds. I am absolutely not sitting there drooling, staring at the wall, out of commission for a half hour. I am back to work immediately.
It is a very common pushback, and you are right to question the raw stopwatch time. The 23-minute figure often feels absurd when applied to micro-interruptions.
And furthermore, the solution that is often presented, this transition stack idea, where you spend 3 to 5 minutes doing a specific ritual between every single task switch, honestly sounds like organized procrastination. If I have to jump between emails, a meeting, and a document 8 times a day, and I do a 5-minute ritual each time, I am literally losing 40 minutes of my day just doing rituals. How is that productive?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you'll see why the 23-minute tax is real and why the transition ritual is necessary. We have to stop looking at the stopwatch and start looking at the math of cognitive depth.
Cognitive depth.
Yes, you can physically return your hands to the keyboard and start typing immediately after a 15-second interruption, but the depth of your focus is shattered.
What do you mean by depth?
The neural networks required to hold complex, abstract variables in your mind, the state required for myelination, take time to assemble. When you are interrupted, those networks collapse. You reply to the Slack message, and you return to the document. But for the next 15 to 20 minutes, you are not doing deep work.
You're just kind of skimming the surface.
You are doing shallow work on a deep work project. You are rereading the same paragraph 3 times because the words aren't sinking in. Your error rate spikes. Your ability to synthesize complex ideas is completely stunted because half of your brain is covered in the attention residue of the interruption.
Oh, I see.
That 15 to 20 minutes of subpar, foggy, error-prone output, that is the refocus tax.
Okay, well, that hits home. It's not that I am literally doing nothing for 23 minutes. It's that my brain is running on a 4-cylinder engine when the task requires a V8. I'm moving forward, but I'm towing an anchor.
Precisely. Now, let's look at the math of the transition stack versus the unmanaged, chaotic transition. An unstructured transition, say, slamming your laptop shut after a tense budget meeting and immediately opening a creative design file costs you roughly 15 minutes of fighting that anchor. You are staring blankly, fighting the Zeigarnik effect, and trying to load the new context into your brain.
I have spent entire afternoons in that foggy transition state.
Now, compare that to a structured 3-minute transition ritual. Yes, it costs you 3 exact minutes on the stopwatch. But because that ritual clears the attention residue and primes the neural pathways for the new task, it saves you from the 15-minute cognitive fog.
So you make up the time.
You are netting 12 minutes of pure, high-quality, deep focus per switch. If you do that 8 times a day, you are not losing 40 minutes to procrastination. You are mathematically reclaiming over an hour and a half of pure myelination-level focus that was previously bleeding out into the ether.
The math is undeniable when you factor in cognitive depth. So let's break down this transition stack. It comes from the Goals and Progress system, and it is a step-by-step protocol to intentionally manage these seams in our day. It consists of 3 distinct phases: close, reset, and prime.
Let's start with phase 1, which is close. This should take about 30 to 60 seconds. Its entire purpose is to create explicit, manufactured cognitive closure to defeat the Zeigarnik effect. You have to convince your brain that the task is safely stored so it stops ruminating.
And the most powerful tool for this is something called a parking note.
I would argue the parking note is the single highest value micro-habit a knowledge worker can adopt. Before you switch tasks, before you answer the phone, before you join the Zoom link, you take a sticky note or a digital notepad and you write a single, highly specific sentence detailing exactly where you are stopping and what the very next physical action is.
Give me an example.
Stopped on page 4, paragraph 3. The very next step is to pull the Q3 revenue numbers and format them into the blue chart. That is it.
By writing that down, you are essentially acting as the waiter in Zygarnik's cafe who finally hands the ticket to the chef. You have offloaded the order. You are giving your brain permission to drop the cognitive tension. You have parked the car. You don't have to keep the engine idling in the background.
Exactly. You achieve artificial closure. Then you immediately move to phase 2, which is reset. This takes 60 to 120 seconds. This is your mental and physical palate cleanser.
The source material mentions deep breathing, but it heavily emphasizes physical movement. Standing up, walking to the window, going to the kitchen for a glass of water. Why is the physical movement so much more important than just closing your eyes at your desk?
Because of how our bodies process stress. When you are engaged in intense work or when you are sitting in a combative meeting, your body is physically primed for threat. Your cortisol levels elevate, your breathing becomes shallow.
So you're physically wound up.
If you stay in that exact same physical chair, in that exact same posture, and simply click over to a new tab to start a creative brainstorming session, your biology is fundamentally mismatched to the task.
Your brain wants to be creative, but your body thinks it's under attack.
Exactly. Physical movement literally changing the geometry of your body by standing up, rolling your shoulders, walking 10 paces helps metabolize and clear those stress hormones from your bloodstream. It breaks the physical posture of tension and signals a neurological mode switch to the brain. You are drawing a physical line in the sand between the old task and the new one.
Wow. The mind-body connection is just inescapable. Okay, so we have closed the open loop with a parking note. We have physically reset our posture to clear the cortisol. Now we enter phase 3, which is prime. This takes 30 to 60 seconds. You need to explicitly load the context for the next task into your working memory.
You never want to start a complex task from a dead stop. So
Right.
you use this minute to prime the pump. You read your previous notes on the project. You read the parking note you left for yourself yesterday.
Or, and I found this incredibly powerful, you write a single intention sentence for the upcoming block of time. Something like, in the next 45 minutes, I will write the rough draft of the introduction and nothing else.
That intention sentence leverages a psychological concept identified by Dr. Peter Gollwitzer called implementation intentions. His research shows that pre-deciding your actions, stating exactly what you will do, and when mathematically doubles your follow-through rate compared to simply relying on motivation or willpower, you are completely bypassing the in-the-moment decision-making process, which is often hijacked by the desire for easy dopamine.
You also mentioned changing your sensory environment during the prime phase, putting on noise-canceling headphones, turning on a specific instrumental playlist, or even just moving your laptop from your desk to the kitchen table.
You are creating environmental anchors. If you only ever listen to a specific Hans Zimmer soundtrack when you are doing deep work, your brain will eventually associate those specific audio cues with intense focus. You are essentially Pavloving yourself into productivity. When the music starts, the brain automatically shifts into high gear because it recognizes the cue.
It is brilliant. Okay, so we have secured the borders. We have built these massive transition stack walls between our tasks so the residue doesn't leak over and contaminate our day. But that brings us to the final challenge. How do we sustain that relentless, unbroken focus during the deep work block itself? You are sitting there, you are primed, the headphones are on, you look at the massive frog you have to eat. How do you keep from getting overwhelmed and checking your phone 5 minutes in?
This is where we deploy Francesco Cirillo's legendary framework, the Pomodoro technique.
The famous tomato timer. The concept itself is incredibly simple, almost deceptively so. 25 minutes of intense, completely unbroken focus on a single task, followed by a mandatory 5-minute break. But I want to dig into why this specific constraint works so well, because it's clearly not just about setting an alarm on your phone.
It works because it directly counters one of our most deeply ingrained cognitive biases, the planning fallacy.
Oh, I know the planning fallacy intimately. It is the bane of my existence.
Human beings are notoriously, almost comically terrible at estimating how long future tasks will take. We suffer from a severe optimism bias. When we look at a future project, we picture an idealized, frictionless version of ourselves working in a vacuum with zero interruptions and perfect clarity.
Yes, I have a perfect example of this. A few months ago, I told my partner I was going to quickly remodel the small half bathroom downstairs over the weekend. I looked at the room, thought, paint, new mirror, swap the faucet. Easy. Saturday afternoon.
How'd it go?
3 weeks later, there is a hole in the drywall, the water is shut off, and we are brushing our teeth in the kitchen sink. I completely failed to account for the trips to the hardware store, the strip screws, the sheer fatigue.
That is the planning fallacy in action. When applied to knowledge work, time becomes this vast, abstract, anxiety-inducing void. When you tell yourself, I need to write this 30-page strategic report today, your brain looks at the sheer volume of unstructured time required and triggers an overwhelm response. And how does the brain soothe overwhelm? By seeking immediate, cheap dopamine through procrastination. You check Twitter.
So how does a tomato timer fix that?
The Pomodoro technique works by fundamentally inverting time.
Inverting time. Explain the mechanics of that.
Instead of time being a vast, abstract ocean of pressure that you have to navigate, the Pomodoro turns time into a concrete, highly manageable unit of effort. You are no longer working on a massive strategic report. You're simply tasked with completing one single tomato, one 25-minute block of effort.
So you just focus on the step in front of you?
Right. You dramatically shrink the horizon of your focus to something so small and so finite that it completely bypasses your brain's overwhelm and procrastination triggers. Anyone can focus for 25 minutes.
It's the exact same psychological mechanism as the outside-inside method we talked about with Brian Tracy. You are artificially shrinking the barrier to entry so you can generate momentum. But there's a very strict rule with the Pomodoro system that people often ignore, which ruins the effect. The rule of the ring.
Yes. Once a Pomodoro timer is set, it must ring. A Pomodoro is an indivisible unit of time. It cannot be paused. It cannot be split.
There are no quick checks.
Exactly. If you are 10 minutes in and your phone buzzes with a text message, you do not pause the timer to look. If a brilliant idea for a different project pops into your head, you do not open a new tab to research it. You quickly write the idea on a physical piece of paper and immediately return to the task. You are fiercely protecting the integrity of the 25-minute block.
What happens if you finish the task early? Say I set a Pomodoro to draft a tricky email, and I nail it in 15 minutes. I have 10 minutes left on the ticking clock. My instinct is to say, great, done, let's open Instagram. But the rule says you do not stop the timer. You pivot to a concept called overlearning.
Overlearning is a fascinating concept from educational psychology. If you finish the primary objective, you use those remaining minutes to deepen your mastery of the material. You do not switch contexts. You review the email you just wrote to tighten the prose. You read an industry article related to the topic.
You just keep grinding on that same topic.
Yes, you analyze the process you just used to see if you can create a template to make it faster next time. You spend the full unbroken 25 minutes engaged in high-value cognitive effort related to the task.
It is about respecting the psychological container you built. But there is a bigger, longer-term psychological game being played here with these tomatoes, isn't there? It connects back to the morning routine.
It does. It ties everything perfectly back to Teresa Amabille's research on the power of small wins. When you utilize the Pomodoro technique, you aren't just managing time. You are creating a physical artifact of your effort. When you track these tomatoes, when you put a physical ink checkmark on a piece of paper on your desk for every 25-minute block you complete, you are creating a highly visible, tangible record of your progress.
You are visualizing your invisible cognitive effort.
Exactly. Amabille's research proved that making visible progress in meaningful work is the ultimate catalyst for a positive inner work life. It creates a self-sustaining positive feedback loop. You finish tomato, you draw the check mark. That visual proof of progress releases a hit of dopamine, which makes you feel motivated and capable.
Which gives you the push for the next one.
Right. That motivation gives you the exact energy required to start the next tomato. You are building an engine of productivity that fuels itself.
So we're at the end of the line. Let's snap all of these incredibly complex puzzle pieces together into the master system we promised at the beginning. Let's recap the biological operating system we have just built.
It truly is a comprehensive defense mechanism for your attention.
We started by realizing that we cannot just roll out of bed and let the algorithms and urgencies of the world dictate our focus. We built a customized, realistic morning boot sequence based on Tim Ferriss's principles to generate our own energy and claim a locus of control before the day even begins.
Then we stopped fighting our genetic hardwiring. We used Elizabeth Ricker's chronobiology data to audit our energy and find our biological peak hour, whether we are a morning lark, an evening owl, or a midday intermediate.
And we mapped Brian Tracy's ugliest, most cognitively demanding frog directly onto that specific biological peak. We used Cal Newport's philosophy and the Reclaim.ai data to ruthlessly separate the needle-moving, myelination-building deep work from the noisy, junk food shallow work that secretly wastes 50% of our days.
To protect that vital deep work, we built defensive walls using the transition stack. We learned to intentionally close open loops with parking notes, physically reset to clear stress hormones, and prime our working memory to eliminate the 23-minute refocus tax and stop attention residue from bleeding across our calendar.
And finally, we learned how to sustain intense effort inside those walls by inverting time with Pomodoros, turning massive anxiety-inducing projects into a series of highly manageable 25-minute small wins that fuel our inner work life.
It is a fortress.
But a system, no matter how scientifically sound, only works if you actually turn it on. So here's your final call to action. Do not try to implement all of this tomorrow. If you try to do the full morning routine, track your chronotype, and do 10 Pomodoros on day 1, you will trigger the planning fallacy, overwhelm yourself, and quit by noon. I want you to apply just one of these tools tomorrow.
Just one is enough to start.
Exactly. Maybe you just try writing a single parking note before you jump into your 10:12 a.m. meeting. Just one sentence on a sticky note. See how it feels to grant your brain that explicit cognitive closure. See if you feel a little less foggy when you return to your desk.
This raises an important question, though, as we wrap up this entire discussion.
Lay it on us.
We have spent this entire time talking about the mechanics of how to get things done more efficiently, how to focus, how to transition, but we have to take a hard look at what we're actually becoming in the process. Brian Tracy highlighted a deeply chilling statistic in his work. He notes that roughly 80% of people flatline in their skills after just 6 to 12 months on a new job.
Wait, they just stop getting better after a year?
Yes. They work incredibly hard for the first year to master the basic requirements of the role. And then, once they are competent enough not to get fired, they settle into a state of automaticity, a comfort zone. For the rest of their careers, they just coast on those initial skills.
So they aren't actually improving.
No, they mistake having 10 years of experience with having 1 year of experience repeated 10 times. Only the top 20% of performers actively engage in deliberate practice, seeking out deep work that pushes them past their current capabilities to constantly evolve.
That is a terrifying thought. You could be incredibly productive, checking off hundreds of tasks, but still be completely flatlined in your actual growth.
Precisely. You can efficiently manage your stagnation. So, my final lingering thought for you to mull over as you look at your calendar tomorrow is this: look closely at your daily routines, the exact habits you have right now. Are your systems currently designed to help you engage in deliberate practice, push your cognitive boundaries, and evolve into that top 20%? Or have you accidentally built a highly efficient, perfectly optimized system for remaining comfortably, permanently flatlined?
That is a heavy, heavy question. Are we optimizing for growth, or are we just optimizing for comfort? I love that challenge. And it brings us right back to where we started. You cannot just take an X-ray of your workday and instantly spot the fractures in your career trajectory or your focus. The diagnostic reality of our lives is murky and complex. But the tools we unpack today, the transition stack, the chronotype audits, the Pomodoros.
Or the contrast die.
Yes, they highlight the hidden inefficiencies, the attention residue, and the biological mismatches that are draining your potential. They allow you to actually see what is happening inside your own operating system.
And once you can clearly see the bugs in the system, you finally have the power to rewrite the code.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, your time, your focus, and your attention are the most precious, irreplaceable assets you possess in this world. Defend them fiercely. We will see you next time.